The topic of self-care, Gen Z and self-care, looking after themselves and others too. This will be an interesting topic. I think self-care, I suppose different people interpret it in different ways, but we'll get more of an insight from TV psychologist Honey Lancaster James, who'll give us more of an insight into the research. So, Honey, welcome to the show. Great to have you on board.
Oh, lovely to be here. Thank you for having me. This has come from a new piece of research actually that was commissioned by Funny How Flowers Do That, which is an initiative of the Flower Council of Holland, obviously very famous for their flowers and the Keukenhof and known as the Garden of Europe. So they had commissioned a large study. It was a poll of 2,000 adults. And what came out of that was quite interesting because they asked people, what do you do for your self-care? How do you sort of invest in yourself? That kind of thing. And they found some generational differences. So the sort of millennials and Gen Z were spending on average quite a bit more on their own self-care, on things like little treats, pampering, things like that. And what they found was that the older you get, the less likely you are to kind of spend on yourself. Even though sort of across the board, on average, people, really quite a high percentage, 84% of everyone surveyed said, that it does sort of boost your mental health to engage in a bit of self-care and look after yourself and treat yourself. Obviously, as well, there was a focus on things like the impact of flowers in our life. I mean, I love flowers. I always have done. Even named my daughter after a flower. So I was sort of really on board with this when I heard this, but they found that a lot of people, so 49%, when they get a bunch of flowers, they say it really brightens up the room, they love the vibrant colours, they love the scent, but even more than that, there seem to be well-being benefits because just from having a kind of floral arrangement around, people say they feel happier, they feel more relaxed, and they feel more at home. And I think there is something about nature, and in particular sort of bringing the outside in, bringing natural things into our home environment and living things really does make us feel more at home and makes us feel more relaxed. And I think perhaps the younger generations are really instinctive about this, sort of, treating themselves to a bunch of flowers on the way home to kind of make the place feel more homely and get those sort of well-being boosts seems to come a bit more naturally to perhaps the younger generation.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, could it also be, I was speaking to you there, could it also be maybe as we sort of get older, you kind of, you probably spend more on your children, or people listening to the show might even be grandparents, and they might spend on their grandkids. And could that be something that you think? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think for sure. I mean, there's definitely, let's be honest, as we get older, there's more people that we're responsible for. We might have children, we might have elderly relatives, we might have bigger financial commitments. So, of course, as you get older, you might have less to spend on yourself. There might just simply be a practical element of that. But I do think as well that younger generations now are more focused on this whole concept, this whole idea of self-care. I think with sort of raising awareness around mental health, well-being, the kinds of things that we can do for ourselves to boost our mood, keep ourselves going even perhaps during stressful times. All of that seems to be a very sort of modern day focus. I personally think it's a good thing, although I think we do need to sort of get that in balance, because I think as you get older you realise as well that it isn't just looking after yourself that makes you feel better. And in fact, psychological studies have found that being more what we call allocentric, so as opposed to egocentric, where we are sort of the centre of our world, being more allocentric, where we put others up front and central in our lives as well, and we think about their needs, actually gives us both well-being benefits and can improve happiness. So I don't think it's all about sort of only looking after yourself. I think part of that is also putting a smile on other people's faces, but that also was supported and borne out by this particular survey as well, because they found that where they looked at things like what do people give as gifts to each other. And when they polled these sort of 2,000 people, they came up with two lists. One which was the top 10 things that people do for themselves as an act of self-care, or gifts that they give to themselves, treats, and one which was a list of the sort of mood-boosting gifts that we give to others. And there were some quite interesting differences, because in the self-care list, the top three things that people do for themselves are they treat themselves to chocolate, they have their favourite meal, or they maybe have an ice cream or a book or something. The top three, of course, all being edible things, whereas on the gifts for others, there was a little bit more there that was less about sort of eating things. So chocolate still came out top, so we do love our chocolate. But the second on that list was to give flowers. And I think that's the thing, we tend to think in terms of, if I'm giving a gift, well, I'll send them some flowers, or I'll bring some flowers, or the other one was candles as well. Whereas when it's ourselves, we tend to think of sort of food things and things we can consume. And flowers were still in the top 10, but it was lower down. And I think I'd like to encourage people really to sort of think about, if you do want to treat yourself, going more for something like some flowers, which will really brighten your home and put them on the table and last, and that you can admire and look at, is probably better for you in the long run than just sort of eating an ice cream or whatever. And obviously there's other aspects to that. But I think one of the reasons why, whether you're treating yourself, whether you are engaging in self-care with nature and flowers, is, equally beneficial giving it to others, is because what we get when we look at nature, when we look at natural things, is we get a sense of awe and wonder that you can't really get from sort of other things. So when people go for walks in nature, and this old sort of, the old adage, stop and smell the roses, it really does have mental health, well-being benefits for you, because you're engaging in this sense of awe when you look at a beautiful flower and you think, gosh, nature's produced this. I did this yesterday, actually. The peonies were out, these big pom-pom flowers, and I was looking at one thinking, gosh, it's so beautiful, so amazing. And when you get into that mindset of awe and wonder, it really does boost your mood. So I think this is an interesting study, but I think also there is real benefit in taking some of this on board, whether you are treating yourself or others. Going for these kind of aspects of nature, bringing the outside in, can be really good for you.
No, absolutely. I think it's sort of that balance, isn't it, really, Penny, between, say, people trying to live this sort of, hedonic lifestyle where they become sort of overindulgent and just sort of, self-care. But you try and get that kind of balance between obviously having some sort of meaning in your life and sort of, being there for others too. And I think that's the sort of, I think most people probably viscerally know the balance. But I mean, like you said before about, as you get older, you become, the responsibilities, and also there's more people in your life that you kind of. But I think the point you made there, I think, is quite a good one, really. I mean, I certainly equate going for a walk in nature, and self-care for me is just going for a walk in nature and having a nice coffee at the end of it, and just some time to myself, really. It's just 5 minutes, to just clear the mind and go for an hour walk or so. But I mean, the thing is as well, just sort of speaking to you there, it's interesting, really, because there's a lot of people out there that probably don't do a great deal for themselves. I think a lot of us can fall in that category at some point where, how often do we do something for ourselves during the week? Do you think sometimes some people feel that's kind of, maybe guilt is a strong word, but feel that they don't feel they should be doing anything for themselves, if that makes any sense?
Yeah, it does. I mean, I think you're sort of talking about that idea that perhaps some of us get, where to put ourselves first might be somewhat self-indulgent or selfish or whatever. I think people worry about that, but the reality is that actually we owe it to ourselves. We have a responsibility to ourselves more than any other individual to look after ourselves, to take care of ourselves, to monitor our well-being, to ensure that we're looking after ourselves, because ultimately if we don't do that, eventually someone else will be having to look after us, and we won't be useful to anyone else either. And we know that sort of having a positive state of well-being is important for ensuring that we can remain compassionate, supportive, available and helpful to other people. but also, of course, if we don't look after ourselves, we could descend into illness, and maybe it could affect us at work or within our communities, and of course then we end up needing the help of other people. So I don't think anyone should ever sort of feel guilty or self-indulgent for taking a little bit of time or even spending a little bit of money on yourself and treating yourself and looking after your own well-being. And again, I wonder whether that's one of the reasons why, say, millennials and Gen Z, according to this survey, are doing that a little bit more, because perhaps they instinctively know this, that actually you have to do that sometimes. You have to look after yourself. And it could be something really small that really puts a smile on your face and gives you a boost or makes you feel more relaxed, which then enables you to work better or be more available to others. So I do think it's important that we allow ourselves to engage in self-care. We definitely owe it to ourselves, but also to others to do that. It's that old trope, isn't it? If you're on an aeroplane and it's going down, you put the oxygen mask on yourself before you can help anybody else. And
Absolutely,
I think we need to do that in little ways every day. We need to nourish ourselves well, mind, body and spirit, really, if we want to sort of show up in our lives and in our relationships and in our homes and workplaces as the best that we can do. And let's face it, life can be really stressful and difficult, and I think especially lately there's been so much that we have to deal with, that we have to get the balance, and maybe we have to make more of an effort to look after ourselves in order to shore ourselves up and sort of balance that out and combat some of that.
Absolutely,
yeah.
No, it's 100%. Precisely, and I think that's sort of getting that balance right, and that, like you've said there, I mean, sort of, there are a lot of things going on in the world at the moment, and I think certainly for me, I sort of try and get the balance. I just sort of switch off the media, don't read things, and only if I need to know, I try to keep that awareness. But I think it's easy. I think these days, Penny, for people to go down the rabbit hole and get sort of consumed in a lot of things, really, and it can't be good for mentally. I think sort of getting in nature, doing stuff for yourself, getting out there. And also, trying to focus on some of the good things that are going on in the world too. There's still. I
think, and that's one of the reasons why I think nature is so healthy for us to focus on. Because one of the things we do, so if you've got a bunch of flowers on the table in front of you, you'll find yourself so naturally drawn to the sort of the beauty, the scent. It brings you into the present moment because it's a very mindful thing to sort of look at, to focus on. And so what happens is you end up forgetting, even if it's just momentarily, forgetting what you're worried about, forgetting the stress, because you're smelling the flowers, you're looking at something that's so beautiful, that feels so special. And that is very gripping of your attention. And in that moment, you become more mindful, you become more present. And that's when you take that sort of mental break from all of the other things that are going on in the world. And we have to do that. We have to allow ourselves time to do that. And whether you're going for a walk in a green space and doing that, listening to the birds singing, those are the moments when we actually do sort of step out of our own problems and our own difficulties just for a moment and connect with where we really are in the world. And for many of us, I think because of the mass media and things like that, we're often busily worrying and anxious about all these other problems and other things going on. And sometimes we do have to come back to the present moment, make our own little environment as nice as we can, so that we can restore ourselves and get a bit of rest and relaxation. And then, we're getting that in balance again, and reducing the stress so that we've got more to give to the world after that.
Absolutely. And I think that's probably, a good point to make. And certainly if people took a deep breath and a sort of step back at the moment, it would go a long way towards sort of, we're on this sort of planet for a short time type thing. And I think that, obviously some of the things that everyone sort of, and don't get me wrong, obviously I'm not making light of the things that are going on in the world, but certainly taking a bit of time for ourselves and putting things in perspective as well, isn't it, honey? It's like putting life into perspective, really. I mean, life can be pretty fragile. You hear one day and sort of, anybody, I think it's great to sort of take that time out, and I think certainly for me over the years I've learned to sort of have a time out and come back sort of on that front foot type thing, a lot more recharge and that sort of stuff. But if anyone wants to know more about your work and the research, can you signpost them anywhere?
Well, the best place to go to find out more about this particular study and the research on this would be to go to the website Funny How Flowers Do That. So this is an initiative by the Flower Council of Holland. There's lots of information on there. But also, if you don't, I think we have to be realistic. Not everybody has the opportunity to go and have a lovely walk in a natural environment, or to maybe step away from their desk or whatever they're doing with their day. So one of the things I do think that's a positive about social media, and we hear a lot of the negatives, but one of the positives is that there are some really good channels on there where you can take just a few moments and maybe you're following something which is showing you nice natural environments, something that gives you a little well-being boost just for a moment. And actually the Instagram that goes along with this initiative is really lovely. So if you go on Instagram and look at How Flowers Do That, you can get all sorts of eye candy there, from the feast of visuals, from all the flowers and the arrangement tips and things like that. I just loved it. It's one of those things where you go on there and you go, oh,
yeah, absolutely.
and you start sort of scrolling through. So I think that's the other thing as well, that we have to be realistic. Not everybody has the luxury of living near green spaces or anything like that, but you can always, I do think you can always get a bit of immediate boost, a bit of mindfulness, a bit of a well-being boost from just admiring those beautiful things in nature that we can't create, we can't compete with. These are beautiful aspects of the natural world, and when we focus on them, I really do think it gives us a lift.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think one of the great things about the UK, to be honest, is you're never too far away from sort of green space, to be honest. It's like you don't have to drive too far away from maybe like a city. So there is that also, I think, sort of getting out there and sort of, and obviously you said they might not live in the vicinity, but, there's the transport system here, you can get somewhere and just even like have a half a day out and whenever it is, and just get out there and drive out there and just have a walk, get the fresh air and clear your head.
Yeah, but I'm thinking as well of people who perhaps can't get out, maybe they're illness or they're at home with the kids or whatever. 100%. But I think that's the other thing as well, to remember, I suppose, that maybe there's people in your life who maybe can't get out much, elderly relatives or whatever. And again, I personally do love sending people flowers and things instead of other things, because it really brightens the home for anyone who can't leave home, for example, brings that connection to them. And I think there's a reason why it's remained. You think about, it's been hundreds and hundreds of years, people would always, it's a very traditional sort of gift exchange. And we know that a lot of social bonding exists on the sort of exchange of gifts. And I think as well, now it's like, actually, it's okay to do that for ourselves as well.
Absolutely.
And bring some of that into our own homes.
Absolutely. No, great speaking to you. And it's been really interesting and informative. And,
pleasure.
Have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Cheers, Jimmy. Thank you.
Thank you.